Okay, let's see the lore behind Elden Ring.
Our story doesn't begin in the lands between. It begins in the cosmos, far away, with an outer god called the Greater Will. There are a lot of outer gods mentioned in Elden Ring. You can think of these kind of like the great ones of Bloodborne. They're distant beings. They're all-powerful and they're quite unknowable by design. But many of these outer gods want to make their presence felt in the world. The Greater Will may be most of all. To this end, it sent a golden star hurtling towards...
It's been like half a year since the last, or maybe a bit less than half a year since I last played Elden Ring. I did a few playthroughs and did a Game Plus. So I did the Frenzied Flame ending, did the Rani ending, and I did the Dung ending. So, yeah,
the lands between.
Just a heads up.
The Elden Star's incantation tells us that this golden star was bearing a beast, an Elden beast. The Elden Remembrance calls it a vassal beast of the Greater Will. If you didn't know, a vassal is someone who holds land on behalf of their overlord. Obviously, this is fitting in this case, because the Elden Beast occupied the lands between on behalf of the Greater Will, and was a living incarnation of the concept of order. As such, this beast would later become the Elden Ring.
Wait, what is the
Elden
beast
Ring
Elden
itself is made up of runes of power.
I didn't know that.
Some great, some small, that together represent a sort of logic for the world to follow. Thus, the Elden Ring represents order. The true nature of this order is a subject of constant debate and research undergone by fundamentalists. But two of the key fundamentals are the laws of causality and regression. You can think of the law of causality as cause and effect, where actions have consequences, and those consequences are new causes that branch out into infinity. These are the relationships between the trees represented. Then there's the law of regression that states that all things eternally yearn to converge and return to their roots. Fittingly, then, the Elden Ring is housed within the Erdtree, which towers over the lands between. But it's very important to stress that life in the lands between did not begin with the Erdtree, the Elden Ring, or the Elden Beast. No, the lands between were occupied well before the Greater Will came. There were other beings here. There were other factions here.
Wait, what?
There were other gods here. Okay. And there was even another great tree here before.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
And this is where a huge twist regarding the Erdtree comes in. So, there are incantations in the game called Aspects of the Crucible. According to their descriptions, these are manifestations of the Erdtree's primal vital energies. And I quote, "They are an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together." But how could all life be blended together in the Erdtree if the Erdtree appeared after life existed? Well, there can only be one answer, right? That the Erdtree is a parasite, and it took over a tree that existed here before. This ancient tree was called the Great Tree.
Okay.
So the Great Tree was almost certainly the location of this primordial crucible, and it must have been a very powerful primordial force for the Greater Will to have commandeered. It might even be the reason the lands between is important to the Greater Will in the first place. It also explains why spells and enemies related to the Great Tree's crucible would eventually be looked down upon. For example, the Knot Talisman is fashioned from a knotted vestige of the Crucible, and it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Enemies related to the Crucible are the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the Crucible Knights, and all three of them would be shunned, enslaved, or imprisoned.
The worst enemy.
Those who speak for the Erdtree don't want you to know its roots, so to speak. According to the spell, protection of the Erdtree, in the beginning everything was in opposition to the Erdtree.
Come on.
But through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order.
In Marika's own words, the Erdtree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the order, or divest thyself of it. To wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart.
But the Greater Will needed more than a big tree. It needed loyal agents in the lands between. To this end, it has the Two Fingers, who are its envoys. The The Two Fingers heirloom has a weird picture of them, but it reads,
What? I didn't
of
even
course,
notice that.
fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith. These words are interpreted by the finger readers. These are the undying old crones that you would have found.
I thought it
throughout
actually
the
was the
between.
same person.
They pass down the wisdom of the Two Fingers.
Oh no, it
or at
couldn't be
least
because there
they
was
used
like
to.
1,000 corpses at the end.
Please, your
But at the start I thought it was the same person,
I
definitely.
can read them.
Didn't notice
Most
they
of
have
them
different crowns.
appear to have lost their purpose, and they're desperate to read your fingers and tell you annoying riddles, since their two fingers are likely dead. And yes, of course, there are multiple sets of two fingers.
I was like,
You would
oh,
have
this is probably
found
an
their
area where
corpses
you
on the
refight
tops of the
bosses or
divine
something like
towers.
that.
Atop
Nope.
these towers, you loot the fingers in order
I
to
would wish there
activate the
was an
true
area where you
power
could
of a
refight the
great
bosses.
rune. Specifically, though, you are giving benediction back to your great rune. You're taking a blessing back from the two dead fingers, essentially. This is just one of many blessings that the two fingers can bestow, and my point is kind of that the two fingers clearly have more than just
Hey, that's
influence. They have real power on some level. The Greater Will needs these powerful envoys and agents because, while it's obviously incredibly powerful, it does seem limited by a few things. First is space. The Greater Will didn't come to the lands between itself, it sent an elden beast to do its bidding instead. Second is time. There is a moment later in the game where your pair of two fingers go still because they're forced to commune with the Greater Will for guidance.
When they are finished, the fingers will again offer their guidance. But thousands, if not tens of thousands, of moons must first pass. No matter for me, but you.
What kind of
How
race are the
will
finger
you
readers,
ever
though?
manage to wait?
Like,
So the Greater Will needs a physical manifestation of order. It needs envoys to convey its will, but what it also needs is a god. Introducing Marika the Eternal. I have this utterly
God.
enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore,
Jesus.
and there's a reason she's at the center. She's essentially the equivalent of Gwyn from Dark Souls.
I didn't play
Except,
Dark Souls.
Unlike Gwyn, Marika didn't just crawl out of the dark and find power. To an extent, it seems like she earned it. We don't know much about her origins, except that she is of the Newman
But
race,
Marika and
which
Radagon
is
the
actually an
same
origin
person,
that you
right?
can choose in the character selection screen. Newman come from outside the lands between, and are supposed
Oh,
descendants
so it's
of
like Hollow Knight,
denizens
where
of
the
another
king
world.
came from the
Long-lived,
outer world
but seldom born.
and made the
At some point,
civilization.
Marika was chosen as an Empyrean. What is an Empyrean? Well, an Empyrean is a being chosen by the fingers as a candidate for godhood. As an Empyrean, Marika received the aid of a shadow to do her bidding. So what is a shadow? Well, it's a wolf, shadowbound to its Empyrean by the two fingers.
Yeah.
Luna
Didn't know that.
Princess Rani is another example of an Empyrean with a shadowbound beast.
Oh.
You would have met Blythe.
Yeah, we killed
These
that guy.
creatures are the Empyrean's
Twice.
very own shadow. They are completely loyal to their needs and, by definition, incapable of treachery. Marika's shadow was a beast called Malakath. Every Empyrean uses their shadow in different
Question,
ways.
is
but
Malakath and the
Marika's sole
Death
need of
guy
her
the same
shadow
person?
was as a vessel to lock away
Or
destined
is that a
death.
third wolf
So
guy?
what is destined death? Well, according to Enya, it's the rune of death.
Because I killed the Deathroot guy, or he disappeared for me in my playthrough before I met Malakath. So I thought it was a new person. I also think after I killed Malakath in my replay through that the Deathroot guy still was in the cathedral or whatever it's called in the land. But I don't know if it's the same guy or if it's that a third
The
wolf
rune
guy.
of death goes by
And if
two
so, who is
names.
his?
The
Like,
other
who is he
is
guarding or
destined
helping out?
death.
We mentioned earlier that the Elden Ring is made up of runes, and at some point, maybe when she was chosen as a god, Marika plucked the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. She gave the Rune of Death to Malakath, her totally loyal shadow, who bore a black blade imbued with this rune. It's kind of genius, really. In a single act, she removed the concept of death from the lands between, while also commanding total control of death through her shadow, who could deliver it at her whim. Now, some of you might be asking, If death is removed from the lands between, how come I can kill this dog? First off, shame on you. Second, from a lore point of view, that dog isn't really dead. It's simply in the process of its spirit, or its soul, returning to the Erdtree. Catacomb dungeons, for example, are specifically constructed near the roots of the Great Tree for this reason, so that the Erdtree can reabsorb their ashes back into it. This process replaced the concept of a death that you were destined to have. But this random spirit outside of a catacomb dungeon says it best.
Have patience until time comes and all.
As another example of this theory, when you kill a major boss, you receive a remembrance of them. These are spirits, and they are hewn into the Erdtree. In this way, thanks to the Erdtree's grace, their spirits are immortalized, in a sense. This new form of death also explains what's happening when you summon spirits.
From ash and return to the Erdtree.
However, some spirits never return to the Erdtree, and they rise within death as corpses or skeletons instead. So this was the new order, and it's important to stress that it was in this moment, when the rune of death was removed, when destined death was taken, this is when order became the Golden Order.
The forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Specifically, this was Marika's Golden Order. So not only did she become a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, she became renowned as Marika the Eternal for her removal of destined death. It was a huge part of her character and her reign as well. However, Marika had more than just death to conquer. She had wars to fight, as the world was occupied by many forces that could threaten her Golden Order. There was war with the Stormlord, who likely ruled over Stormvale, and there was a war with the Giants, who were masters of a flame that could burn the Erdtree. There was war with the ancient dragons, who incidentally had stones that could twist time and thus slay a god. And finally, there was war brewing with the Carrion royalty, who had previously obeyed laws which contravened the Golden Order. Thus, sort of similar to how the Greater Will needed an Empyrean to enforce its will, Marika herself needed someone to wage war. So, there was to be a husband, a consort, an Elden Lord. The man chosen was Hoarah, a ferocious warrior who became known as the Lord of the Battlefield. His crown was warranted with strength, and while it was for this strength that Marika married him, he was also required to take a vow to conduct himself as a lord. To suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within, Hoarah took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back. You'll notice this is another example of a beast being given for the purpose of serving order. Thus, in this moment, he went from being Hoarah, warrior, to Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, consort to Queen Marika, and a certified demigod. Godfrey and Marika had 3 demigod children together. There was Godwyn the Golden, who you saw being killed in the opening trailer, and there were also the reviled Omen twins, Morgoth, who guards the Erdtree, and Mohg, who became Lord of Blood. You might think that Godric was another demigod child, but he actually wasn't. Instead, he was probably descended from Godwyn. Anyway, we'll talk about the demigods more in detail in another video, so subscribe for that. But for now, just know that Godfrey and his offspring were the first demigods, henceforth known as the Golden Lineage. In his wars, Godfrey led his 16 Crucible Knights into battle, who were named so for they fought with the primordial powers of the Erdtree. Their incantations were aspects of the Crucible itself, and they likely fought giants, dragons, the Stormlord, and more to usher in their age, the age of the Erdtree.
In Marika's own words, "Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my Lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erdtree."
The Erdtree would go on to be largely seen as a blessing for all of those in the lands between. especially those close to it in Lanedale,
Yeah,
the
there's a
capital
lot of
city
people like
of the
praying
Erdtree.
towards
The
it.
tree bestowed blessings. For example, the dew that dropped from its branches were like jewels. It loomed overhead as a constant reminder of order, and its roots reached far and wide, relieving many of the burden of death. In fact, Erdtree burial was one of the highest honors a hero could receive. One by one, the previous factions of the world fell. The giants were put to the sword, and their fell god was killed by Marika herself. The ancient dragons broke down the walls of Lanedale, but met fierce retaliation. However, I think the House of the Erdtree encountered the most trouble against the land to their southwest, Leonia. Here, the House of the Moon repelled their offensives time and time again, and I mean that literally, because there was not just one but two wars fought here, and in both of these, there was no victory for the Golden nor for the Moon. And I suspect it was probably because of these lobsters. These damn things can snipe you from like a mile away, and it's bullshit. Actually, it was probably because of the Carrier Knights, who, according to their weapons, were able to wield sorceress battle skills, and despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. These enchanted
I've tried the
knights were
inbuilt, but I
anointed
don't
by the
feel
Lunar
like it's
Queen,
better than the
a
bleed.
young
I'll
astrologer
submit
who
that.
went on to establish the House of Carrier as royalty in this land. With her bewitching lunar magic, she won over the Academy of Raya Lucaria, where glintstone sorcery was studied, and united the Carrion royal family and the learned scholars of Raya Lucaria defended their home from the golden aggressors. At the head of this great golden army was Radagon.
Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host. When he met Lady Renala in battle,
Oh god.
These two champions clashed,
What is
fell in
that,
love,
Renala?
and joined their houses.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Renala. The order of the
Then
Erdtree
how
and
did
the
he become
fate
a
of the
part of
moon
America?
were conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven.
You might think it strange that the Greater Will would permit this union, but it's not too odd, all things considered. As with most From Software games, sorcery and faith are just two sides of the same coin, and both of these powers stem from the cosmos. Radagon and Renala were known to have 3 children together. Lunar Princess Rani, who inherited her mother's propensity for lunar magic, Radan, who took after his father Radagon and would go on to master gravitational magic, and Rykard, who pioneered new hex sorceries and would go on to feed himself to a great serpent. It follows that at some point after this, Marika began to harbor doubts. Doubts about the Golden Order, that she had had a hand in creating.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of
there's no
blind
death, she
belief
shouldn't
are
be that
long
either,
past.
though.
My
I guess she
comrade,
isn't because she's inside the
why
tree.
must ye falter?
And it's at this point that we should talk about Marika's motivations, her character. This is surely going to be one of those huge points of debate in the coming years, but for now, my working theory is that she wanted to discover the truth behind order and the truth behind the greater will, and she believed that bonds had to be broken so that they could be better understood. She believed that there was great meaning to be found in hardship.
Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto
Right, let's get
eternity.
him.
For Lord Godfrey, his struggle ended at the end of his campaigns. According to his armor, he led the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone, and then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. In truth, he was robbed of his grace. Then Marika sent him away.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live
So, a new
and
continent?
die.
This became known as the Long March of the Tarnished, as Godfrey and his tarnished descendants walked away from the lands between.
Oh,
But
and we're
Queen
one of the
Marika
descendants,
absolutely
I guess.
had a plan here, that Lord Godfrey and his descendants would one day return stronger, having struggled outside of grace.
Then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
Soon after, she found a new husband. Either that or a new husband was found for her.
When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Renala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Renala aside, and moreover,
Gosh, she has a
why
weird
a
fucking
mere
egg.
champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
Whatever the case, as a part of this union, Radagon's prior 3 children with Renala became demigod stepchildren, granted grace thanks to their new family tree. Renala was broken by this, and so was her country, Leonia. The Queen's set reads, when Renala, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carian royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart went along with him, and then those at the Academy realized that Renala was no champion after all. In the wake of Radagon's betrayal and Renala's poor judgment, Leonia struggled with civil war, with the Academy of Raya Lucaria on one side and the Carian royals on the other. And it's here, during the age of the Erdtree, that Lunar Princess Rani,
The main
daughter
girl.
of Renala and Radagon, stole a fragment of the Rune of Death.
It happened during the golden age of the Erdtree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a
was about to
fragment
say,
of
is
the
that a
Rune
Lord
of
of the
Death
Rings
from
club?
Malekith, the Black
Kind of
Blade.
looked like one of the Shadow
As
Riders.
mentioned previously, Malekith was Marika's shadow, and he had sealed destined death in a black blade. Then a fragment, only a fragment, of this Rune of Death was stolen. And once this happened, Malekith went a step further in protecting destined death. He bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might rob death ever again. It was too late, however. This fragment of the Rune of Death was used immediately, that night, to kill a demigod, Marika's own son, Godwyn the Golden.
That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
Now, there is a lot of really credible evidence that Marika was behind this plot to have a fragment of the Rune of Death stolen. There's also a ton of evidence that Marika is behind the entirety of your Tarnished quest, but we'll talk about that in another video. For now, all you really
Okay.
need to know,
Like, I
in
think
terms of the
girl
timeline
that
at
we meet
least,
and like
is this.
get upgrades
After the
from
marriage
is
of
sent by
Marika and
Marika. That's
Radagon,
my
and
understanding,
after
at least.
a fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen,
Like, it's her will
Marika went on
following.
to shatter the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it, to no avail. The Elden Ring had been broken into runes, some great and some small.
You know, it's said that Lord Radagon harbored a secret. A famed sculptor of the Erdtree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radagon's likeness in giant stature, when he glimpsed the skeleton in Radagon's closet. And as such, it's said the great statue harbors his secret too.
No,
Of course, the huge twist
the
in
Golden
Elden
Order
Ring
quest
is
line
that
thing,
Radagon
or the Golden
is
Order
Marika,
ending.
or depending on what you believe, he became her, for she knew it was going to happen.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden
Yeah, I think
Order,
she is like sent
thou
by
art yet
Marika.
to become me,
I can't remember her name. It's
thou art
close to
yet
Marika.
to become a god.
It's not
Let us be shattered,
Melanie,
both.
Melanie, I can't remember.
Mine other self.
You can tell when From Software is keeping something a little bit open-ended, and of everything in Elden Ring's lore, this will also go on to be one of the biggest unknowns as we move
Hopefully
forward.
we get some
For example,
more
the wording,
in the DLC.
"Thou art yet to become me," reinforces
Coming
that
soon,
Marika
Sia.
and Radagon were two separate entities before the shattering. However, in contrast, there is also evidence that Radagon was always part of Marika. For example, Enya says that
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
But how can this be if Radagon married Rennala and had those demigod children? The only way that makes sense is if Radagon was always Marika and he just went over there to seduce Rennala long ago. I'll present more concrete theories in the future, but on this matter, the most important thing is, what do you think? While you can figure out a ton of Elden Ring's story, not all of it is open to interpretation.
I didn't get much
Certain
lore
things
from
are,
Radagon.
and
I
this
didn't read
is
that
one
many
of them.
item
And
laws,
your
must
interpretation
admit
is a
that.
big part of what makes this story special. At any rate, the union of Radagon and Marika seems to be a union of two fundamental opposing laws of the Golden Order. We mentioned these laws earlier, actually. There's the law of causality, and Marika is an agent of cause and effect. And there's the law of regression, as Radagon is a character who aspires to be complete and regress together. So I have a theory that forcing these two beings that represent these concepts together would have corrected Marika's deviance. But even so, she was imprisoned in the Erdtree for the crime of the shattering.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
I don't get
The
why she got
conjoined
shackled.
Radagon and Marika even had two demigod children of
Is
their
that
own,
because of the
Mikola
shattering, I guess?
and Millennia. These two children were born afflicted. Mikola was cursed with eternal childhood, and Millennia harbored a horrific rot within. Even so, these two children were both chosen as Empyreans. They were immensely sacred beings, and eligible to inherit godhood from the Greater Will. Perhaps the Greater Will was just desperate to find a worthy successor, and indeed in the Shattering War to come, many would try to claim the shards of the Elden Ring, and they would try to take the throne, including, of course, the Tarnished, who returned from their long march at long last, which we'll talk about in the next main lore video. I should probably also mention here that if you become a patron, you'll see upcoming lore videos early, as that's one of the rewards you get if you pledge to the $3 tier. And if you think my channel really adds a lot of value to the Souls games for you to the point where you pledge $20, then in this new tier you'll receive a new mug every 3 months that has a unique design on it, to do with the games by From
Those are some
Software.
nice mugs,
There are
by
4
the
to
way.
collect. The first one you'll get is inspired by Dark Souls, then Elden Ring, then
Still haven't
Sekiro,
played
and
Dark
finally
Souls.
Bloodborne. And they all have
Haven't
fantastic
played
art that I worked on
Bloodborne
with an
either.
amazing artist named Chu.
I've seen some
But
Bloodborne.
anyway, I figured
I have
this is
also
the right
seen
place to
some
end
Dark
this video
Souls.
because the information here is going to be overwhelming. I bet it probably was too overwhelming,
is.
you know? It took me ages to commit these names and the relationships they had with other characters to memory, so I hope you guys are doing alright. One thing that helped me a lot was that we designed an enormous mind map with pretty much
Jesus
all
Christ.
of Elden
Is that a
Ring's lore,
spreadsheet?
all of its item descriptions,
not a
all of its
spreadsheet.
dialogues, all of the relationships between characters that we can think of. We added all of this together and it helped a ton in learning about the story and visualizing it all. And one day I will make this asset available to you all because I think after doing it, I think this is the quintessential way to piece together the story, and I think giving you guys this asset eventually will make that accessible for people. So I'm really excited about that. I want to thank Absa and Zard for accepting the paid task of helping me put all the raw data into this mind map so that I could better understand everything. I want to thank Parrygod for
It has to be
fulfilling
like
all of my
a
footage
lot of
requests
research on
and
all the different
creating
items
so
and what
many
they say.
cinematic scenes for this video and for you all to enjoy. And I
And, like,
last of all want to thank
Item
John
descriptions
Devlin,
is like
the incredible
mostly
thumbnail.
coming from like
And of course,
from
thank
the
you for watching.
perspective of
There
the
are some
unit you
really
killed,
exciting things
as
ahead,
far as I
and
know.
I actually believe
So
this
it
might
might
be the best
also be a
story
lie
that
or how
From
they
Software have
perceive
ever
the
put
story.
together. I just think not only are there so many amazing item descriptions, but so many of them are impactful. There are so many moments where you piece together the story and have like a eureka moment, and I'm enjoying it so much. But now I'm going to go and play the game a little bit because I've been editing this video for too long. So, see you next time.
Yeah, that was a good video. It did confuse me a lot though, so I might need to see some more videos to like get the full story. I think I saw a snip of a video talking about like the waters of like coming from a distant land into like there's a lot of shipwrecks all around Elden Ring. So like where they came from in the sea and so on. I can see if I can find that video again. But yeah, definitely good video. Go follow VaatiVidya. There will be a link. And let's jump over to some Lost Ark.